She wasn't looking for trouble. She wasn't looking for love. She was just trying to get back to her seat with her nachos still warm. But the moment Rebecca James crouched down in the middle of that roaring stadium and asked a lost little girl if she was okay, her entire life turned on a hinge she didn't even feel move. And the man at the other end of that hinge felt it immediately. This is lost in the crowd. And this is where everything begins. 70,000 people, and not one of them was paying attention to the right thing. The halftime buzzer tore through the stadium, and in 10 seconds every seat emptied at once. Vendors appeared from nowhere. Children broke from their parents toward the concession lines. Music punched through the speakers loud enough to feel in the chest. Kang Jai-ho turned around. His daughter was gone. He didn't shout. Men like Kang didn't shout in public. But the stillness that moved through his body in that single moment, the way every muscle locked, the way his jaw set like something had been poured into it and hardened. Jin felt it from 4 feet away, and his stomach dropped before his mind caught up to why. Jin touched his earpiece, said 3 words. Within seconds, the 4 men positioned around the VIP section were fanning outward through the crowd without a single visible signal between them. Long black hair, neck tattoos, ink wrapping both hands, they dissolved into 70,000 people like they had been trained to disappear. Because they had. Kang didn't wait for a report. He moved himself. People stepped aside without knowing why. Something in the way he walked, deliberate, focused, radiating a frequency that human instinct reads correctly even when the conscious mind hasn't identified the source, opened a path through the crowd without him asking for one. The serpent curling up the side of his neck was visible above his collar. The ink wrapped around both hands caught the stadium light as his fists tightened at his sides. He had one fear in this world. Right now that fear had a face. The face was small. It was somewhere inside 70,000 strangers. And he could not find it. What no one in that stadium could have known, what even Jin standing 4 feet away did not know, was that tucked inside the inner pocket of Kang's jacket was a folded piece of paper. Crayon on white card. A drawing Suah had made 3 weeks ago on the drive to a different stadium, a different game. She had pressed it into his hand before he could redirect her. He had started to put it in the glove box. He had put it in his pocket instead. He had not examined why. He carried it still. Rebecca was having a perfectly good halftime, nachos, cold drink, the particular pleasure of navigating a crowd alone without anyone to wait for or apologize to. She had been coming to these games since she was 9 years old, squeezed into her father's oversized jersey, learning the players by number before she learned them by name. She knew how to move through a stadium. She knew the rhythm. She was completely in her element and she knew it. She was making her way back through the main corridor when she saw her, a little girl. 7, maybe 8. Team jersey 3 sizes too big, hair in 2 perfect buns, sneakers that blinked with each step on the concrete. She was standing completely still in the center of a moving corridor and she was turning, not playing, not looking at something interesting, turning. The slow, methodical rotation of a child who is looking for a landmark and every direction looks exactly the same. Rebecca stopped. She watched for 4 seconds, long enough to be certain, and then she cut through the crowd without breaking stride because no, absolutely not. She was not walking past that. She crouched in front of the girl, eye level. No sudden movements, no performance, no baby voice. You good? The little girl looked up. Her lip was doing that thing, that particular heartbreaking thing where a child is fighting with everything they have not to cry in public. Eyes wide and dry and working very hard. I can't find my appa. Her accent was slight. Her English careful and precise in the way a child's second language is when they have been taught to be proud of it. Rebecca kept her voice easy. The tone that says this is already solved, I just haven't told you the ending yet. Okay, that's okay, we're going to find him. She offered her hand, formal, respectful, treating this small person like a small person. What's your name? Suah. I'm Rebecca. Can you tell me anything about where you were sitting? A number, a letter on the section sign. Suah shook her head carefully. We don't sit with the normal seats. Rebecca filed that away without reacting. Okay. What does your dad look like? And Suah considered this with the absolute seriousness of a child who understands that the answer matters. She reached into the small pocket of her jersey, the pocket Rebecca hadn't noticed, and produced a folded piece of paper with the practiced ease of someone retrieving something they carry always. She unfolded it and held it up. It was a drawing. Crayon on white card. 3 figures standing together. A man with long black hair and hands covered in ink. A small girl. And between them, A third figure with a warm face and big eyes that Suah had colored in with careful, deliberate attention. Rebecca looked at the drawing and felt something she could not immediately name move through her chest. She did not know what she was looking at, not yet. He looks like this, Suah said simply. But I made it before I met her. She tapped the third figure. I just always drew her there because that's where she was supposed to go. Rebecca stared at the drawing for 1 full second. Then she folded it carefully and handed it back. Long hair, drawings on his hands, scary but not to you. Suah's eyes went wide. How did you know the scary part? Rebecca stood and held out her hand. Lucky guess. Come on, let's find him. Security guard at the VIP corridor entrance had seen a lot in 11 years of stadium work. He had not seen a woman in a home jersey, and a Korean child approaching him with the combined energy of someone filing a formal complaint, alongside someone who had complete faith. The complaint would be resolved in their favor. Rebecca explained the situation with exactly the words it needed, and none it didn't. 2 calls and 1 radio check later, they were moving through a side corridor that smelled of old concrete and stadium popcorn, Suah's sneakers blinking steadily against the floor. Rebecca talked to her the whole way, not about being lost, not about being scared, about the game, about players, about whether the home team's jersey color was better than the away team's. Suah had specific opinions. Rebecca let her talk and watched her shoulders come down from around her ears with each passing minute. They turned a corner. Rebecca saw him before Suah did. He was at the far end of the corridor, and he was the kind of still that means the opposite of calm. His long hair had come loose, falling past his jaw now, and the ink covering both hands was visible clearly even from this distance, both fists at his sides. 3 men flanked him in a loose formation. 2 stadium security guards were speaking to him and receiving nothing in return. He looked like a man trying to contain something enormous inside a body that was beginning to fail at the job. Then Suah saw him. Appa. She was running before Rebecca could react, small feet hammering the concrete. And everything that had been locked inside Kang Jae-ho, every carefully maintained, ruthlessly controlled inch of the man, broke completely open at the sound of that single word. He was moving before she crossed half the distance. He dropped to his knees on the corridor floor without hesitation, and when she reached him, he wrapped both arms around her completely, her face in the wool of his jacket, his face in her hair, his eyes closed, and his whole body did the thing bodies do when the thing they feared most turns out not to be true. Rebecca stopped walking. She felt the specific discomfort of having witnessed something private, something that had nothing to do with serpent tattoos or long hair. Something that was only a father and his daughter and the raw, wordless terror of almost. His men had formed a loose wall around them, reflex, not instruction. And then Kang looked up. His eyes found Rebecca. She had expected relief. Gratitude. The particular look a parent gives a stranger who helped their child. What she got was different. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they don't have a category for yet. Completely still. Completely focused. His mind running fast and his face giving almost none of it away, except in the eyes. The eyes were giving more than he knew. She held the look for exactly as long as it took to feel strange, then nodded once. Clean, simple, you're welcome. No ceremony required, and opened her mouth to excuse herself. Her name. His voice was low, accented, the kind of voice that didn't ask questions so much as produce them from thin air. Rebecca. She nodded toward Suah. She didn't cry once. Something moved across his face and was gone before she could name it. He stood slowly, Suah still gripping his jacket. Upright, he was taller than she had estimated from a distance. The neck tattoo caught the corridor light, his hair still loose around his jaw. How did you find the section? She described you. Rebecca held his eyes. It wasn't a long list of candidates. Jin, standing 2 steps behind Kang's right shoulder, produced a sound that was technically a cough. Kang looked at her steadily. You're here alone. I like games better alone. Less explaining required. Suah tugged his sleeve. Appa, she knew all the players' numbers, every single one. He was not looking at Suah. Rebecca crouched to Suah's level. Stay close to your dad tonight, okay? No more solo adventures. Suah accepted this with great solemnity. Rebecca straightened. Enjoy the second half. She turned and walked back down the corridor, behind her no footsteps following. No voice calling her back. But Jin, watching his employer watch the woman until she rounded the corner and was gone, felt the particular chill of witnessing something begin. He had been with Kang 12 years. He knew every expression this man owned. He had never seen that one before. And Kang, standing in that corridor with his daughter's hand in his, and the crayon drawing pressed against his ribs inside his jacket, felt, for the first time in a very long time, that something had shifted in the architecture of his life without his permission. He did not examine it, not yet. If you are new here, welcome. Genuinely. You just walked into something that is going to stay with you long after this episode ends. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn the bell on so you never find out the hard way that you missed an episode. For everyone who has been here from the beginning, you already know we don't do halfway on this channel. Like this video right now because this story has already earned it. And drop a comment, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I want every city, every country, every time zone. Because Lost in the Crowd is landing somewhere new every single day, and I want to know exactly where. Now, 3 days later, someone left flowers on Rebecca's doorstep, and she is standing in her doorway trying to decide what that means. The flowers were white, not roses, something more deliberate than roses. Arranged with the specific intentionality of someone who had consulted a person who actually understood elegance rather than simply assuming. They sat on her doorstep in the early morning light, and the note folded beneath them was written on paper that cost more than the average person's weekly groceries. One line, one name. Sua wanted to say thank you properly. Kang Rebecca stood in her doorway in her Saturday morning clothes and held the note for longer than made any practical sense. The paper was heavy between her fingers, cream-colored, the kind of paper that understood its own quality. Marcus was behind her, mid-sentence about something that stopped mattering the moment she opened the door. He read the note over her shoulder, read it a second time, went completely quiet. Marcus did not go quiet. Rebecca, I see them. There is one name on that note. Can read, Marcus. Name, like a signature on something you were supposed to be warned about. He looked at the flowers, at her face, back at the flowers. You're considering putting them in water. She brought them inside. Found a vase under the sink, filled it with cold water, the tap running loud in the quiet kitchen. Doing it. Genuine awe in his voice. Okay, we are absolutely doing this. I don't know anything yet. She arranged the stems with slightly too much attention. It's flowers, from a man who knew your address. He sat on her counter, arms crossed. That you never gave him. She did not answer that, because she didn't have a clean answer and she knew it. She had turned it over since she found the note, examined it from every angle, and the most rational version she could construct was, a man with significant resources found a name and used them. That was true. It was also not the whole shape of what she was thinking about. The whole shape included the way he had looked at her across that corridor. It included what had happened to his face at the sound of his daughter's voice. It included a crayon drawing on white card with a space already left for a third figure. She hadn't told Marcus about the drawing. She hadn't examined why. He has a daughter, she said. Great, wholesome, so does a lot of people who are still dangerous. She's 8. She was alone in that stadium, Marcus. She didn't cry once. Marcus opened his mouth, looked at her face, changed his approach. You already want to see him again. I don't know him. You put the flowers in water, Rebecca. She picked up her phone, found the number on the note, dialed before she had finished deciding to. Marcus watched her with the expression of a man composing two things simultaneously. A best friend's eulogy and an I told you so speech he would never actually deliver, and said nothing more. Kang answered on the second ring. No greeting. A silence that communicated he already knew who was calling. That specific silence, not absence but presence, settled on the line before a word was spoken. Flowers weren't necessary, Rebecca said. Sua wanted to thank you properly. I agreed with her. You didn't need my address for that, he said. I didn't. She stood very still in her kitchen. He hadn't explained it, hadn't apologized for it. He had confirmed it with the flat directness of someone announcing a fact. This is what happened. Here we are, and waited. She talks about you, he said. Something small shifted in Rebecca's chest. She filed it away without looking at it directly. That's sweet. She wants to say thank you in person. Lunch, the 3 of us. A pause with weight in it. I would arrange it. You would arrange it. Rebecca looked across the kitchen at Marcus. He was shaking his head in a slow, continuous rhythm, the steady tempo of a man keeping time for a song he considered a serious mistake. Think about it, she said. She ended the call. They both already knew she had decided. Marcus came back 2 hours later with printed pages and the expression of a man delivering a diagnosis he wished he didn't have. He laid them on the kitchen table without ceremony. Didn't add drama, which was precisely how Rebecca knew it was serious. Kang Jai-ho. one finger pressed to the name. My cousin does not enjoy being asked questions. He answered anyway. That alone should tell you something. Rebecca sat down. She didn't reach for the pages immediately. She looked at them the way you look at a door before you open it, measuring, deciding, already knowing you're going through. Bad, she said. Not a question. Marcus chose his words with a care she had genuinely never heard from him before. He controls more of this city than the people elected to control it. 3 legitimate businesses on the surface, restaurants, real estate, logistics. All of them the visible layer of things that don't have business cards and don't appear in any public record. He paused. Let that settle. People who move against his organization don't file reports. They stop being visible. Kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the city outside and the flowers sitting on the counter in their vase. He found your address in 3 days, Marcus said. While being friendly, she looked at the pages, then at the flowers, then at the space between them for a long time. Hear you, she said. I already said yes to lunch. Marcus closed his eyes with the full and genuine anguish of a man who had known this was coming and had shown up anyway, because that is what you do. She heard every word he said after that. Every argument, every angle, every version of the address in 3 days detail. She absorbed all of it. She did not cancel lunch. The restaurant had no sign outside. Either you knew the address or you didn't eat there. A man opened Rebecca's car door before she had fully decided to get out, and she took exactly 2 seconds to make the decision, and then she got out, because she had not driven across the city to sit in a vehicle. The interior was warm. Clean architectural lines. Deliberate lighting that made everything look considered. An entire floor of empty tables set and waiting, except for one in the center, where Sua was already standing on her chair with both arms in the air. Rebecca felt the smile arrive before she had chosen it. I told Appa you would come. He said he wasn't sure, but I knew because you are not the kind of person who says yes and then doesn't. Sua, one word from Kang. One specific quiet frequency, Sua sat. Immediately, without argument. That small exchange told Rebecca more about the architecture between these two than any briefing could have. She took the chair across from him. She's right, Rebecca said. I said yes. Kang looked at her across the white tablecloth. He was in different clothes than the stadium, still dark, still precise, the kind of assembled that does not happen by accident. His hair tied back today, the neck tattoo visible above his collar. His hands resting on the table, both of them covered in ink she had now seen clearly enough to recognize the specific patterns. The serpent on his neck continued down onto his left hand. She had not noticed that before. She usually is, he said. It's inconvenient. Sue-ah beamed as if this were the finest compliment she had ever received. The lunch had no business being as easy as it was. Sue-ah dominated the conversation with the focused commitment of a child who had prepared material. She had opinions about the food that were architectural in their specificity. She had grievances about her father's limited braiding vocabulary that she illustrated by pointing at her own hair with theatrical despair. Always this braid, only this braid, forever this braid, Appa, and she conducted an extended cross-examination of Rebecca about which players were worth knowing and why. Kang watched Rebecca with his daughter with an expression that wasn't warm and wasn't blank. Something more careful than warmth. Controlled in a way that suggested maintaining, it was costing something. It was being catalogued. She knew it. She catalogued him back and let him see that she was doing it when Sua left the table with a staff member for dessert. The room changed temperature, not threatening. Just present in a way the small human buffer had been successfully preventing. You came alone, Kang said. I generally do things alone. People who know my name bring someone. I didn't know your name until 3 days ago. She met his eyes evenly. And I came to have lunch with Sua. Quite a lie. Not quite the truth. He heard both. She asked the question she had been carrying since Marcus laid pages on her kitchen table. She did not soften it. She was not made for softening. Do you hurt people? The room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when the question underneath all the other questions finally gets spoken aloud. Kang did not reach for a deflection, did not produce a polished non-answer. He was still for long enough that she understood he was deciding not what to say but how much of the truth to give. Yes, he said, one word. Nothing around it, she absorbed it. Her face didn't change. Her body stayed in the chair, but something behind her eyes shifted, a drawer closing, another opening. What? She said. Power, protection, usually both at the same time. The people around you, they chose to be there. A pause, one beat too long. Most of them. She heard the word he had selected, and she heard the space that lived around it. She marked both. Sua came back with 3 desserts, and the careful architecture of what Rebecca and Kang were not saying folded itself away before it could become something larger. But she felt it. The shape of the thing he hadn't said. The weight of most. When Kang walked her to her car personally, without explaining why, none of his men within earshot, he stopped at her door. "I'd like to see you again." Quite a question. Not quite a statement. Something between that required a response and knew it. She looked up at him. "Think about it," she said. Same words as the phone call. He heard what they meant. She could tell by the way his expression held perfectly still, which was its own kind of answer. She drove away, 4 blocks before she stopped pretending she didn't already know when. Weeks moved differently after that. Rebecca could not have explained it in any way that would satisfy someone asking for logic. Her life looked identical from the outside. Her apartment, her routines, her standing calls with her mother, her standing arguments with Marcus about everything that cost nothing. But the texture had changed. A frequency running beneath the ordinary that had not been there before. They saw each other in careful increments. Lunch became dinner. Dinner became walks through parts of the city she hadn't been to. Sua was present more often than not, loudly, joyfully, completely without subtext, and Rebecca and Kang orbited each other around her, learning each other the way 2 people learn each other when both are being very deliberate about pretending they are not doing exactly that. He noticed things. Small things. How she took her coffee. Which side of the table she preferred. That she was left-handed and always positioned herself with her back to the wall without seeming to think about it. She noticed he was watching. She noticed that knowing she'd noticed changed nothing about the watching. Jin saw all of it. Said nothing. Stored it in the part of himself that kept records on things that hadn't yet become important but were going to. And in a meeting room in a building, no public record would ever connect to Kang's name. A man called Chairman Yu sat at the head of a long table, received a briefing about the woman, and smiled. Rebecca didn't know Chairman Yu existed. She was leaving her gym at night, the heavy industrial door swinging shut behind her, the cold air hitting her face sharp as a slap after an hour inside, when Jin appeared. Not inside. Outside. Leaning against the brick wall with his long hair loose and his hands in his pockets and the expression of a man who had been standing there deciding whether to do this for considerably longer than was comfortable. She clocked him before she reached the door, walked toward him anyway. "He didn't send you," she said. Jin looked at her, then past her both directions. "There is a man in Kang's organization, senior. His name is Chairman Yu." Rebecca waited. "He has been watching you, not the way Kang watches you." He held her eyes. "The other way." The night air was cold and still around them. "What does he want?" "For you to disappear from Kang's life." Jin's voice was flat, the flatness of a man delivering something he would prefer not to be delivering to someone who deserves to know it. "He sees you as a weakness. It's leverage that the wrong people might decide to use against Kang." He paused. "He pulled me aside after the last organizational meeting. He told me you were a liability and suggested I handle it." Rebecca was very still. "Instead you came here. Been with Kang 12 years. Jin looked at her steadily. "I have never seen him the way he is when you are in the room. I don't know yet if that is good for him. I know it makes you dangerous to the people who want him destabilized." He pushed off the wall. "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you to understand what you're standing inside of." He left. Rebecca stood on the cold pavement outside her gym and felt for the first time the true dimensions of what she had walked into. Not the version she had been managing, incremental, reversible, a series of deliberate choices she still controlled. The real version. Large and already wrapped around her life in ways she had not finished mapping. You had already moved. Jin had already been asked. The machinery was already running and she had been standing inside it without knowing the walls existed. She went home, sat in her apartment. Put her phone face down. She did not call Kang. She thought about the drawing. The third figure with the careful eyes. Made before they met. I just always drew her there because that's where she was supposed to go. She sat with that for a long time. She pulled back. Not with a confrontation, not with an explanation. The quiet, gradual kind of withdrawal that works by degrees. The way a tide retreats before anyone notices the waterline has changed. Kang felt it on the 2nd day. He appeared at her apartment on the 4th day without calling ahead. First time he had ever done that. She opened the door and he was simply there in the hallway, and the look on his face was the most unmanaged she had ever seen it. The control was present, but it was working harder than usual. She could see the effort. "Different," he said. "Had a hard week." just this week. She held the door, did not step back to let him in. Kang, who told you something? Silence that followed lasted one beat too long. She watched him read the answer she was not giving. Not going to tell me who. I think I need some space right now. He studied her face with that focused stillness. He knew she was protecting someone. She could see him know it. He sat with the knowledge without pushing, without demanding. Without any of the leverage she understood he could apply if he chose to. He nodded once. "'Kay," he said. He turned and walked away down the corridor. Rebecca stood in her doorway watching him go and felt the wrongness of it settle in her chest like something swallowed at the wrong angle. She almost called his name. She felt the syllable form behind her teeth. She closed the door instead and stood on her side of it with her hand still on the handle for a long time. 3 nights later. Parking garage. 10:15. She heard the footsteps before she saw anyone. 2 sets, 2 even, maintaining her pace with a precision that casual footsteps don't have. She moved her keys, angled toward the lit section near the stairwell. She was reading the geometry of the space, calculating distance and exit. They moved faster than she'd timed them. She was faster than they expected. An elbow, a pivot, 3 seconds of resistance that bought her noise and distance, and not enough time. 2 other men appeared from a different direction entirely. The first 2 read the geometry, read the men, and ran. Rebecca's back hit a concrete pillar. She stood there with her hands shaking slightly and her breathing loud in the equi-dark, and her mind doing that white, very clear thing it does in the moments after something that almost happened. The smell of the garage was sharp around her, exhaust and cold concrete and the particular chemical bite of the overhead fluorescence. She focused on it deliberately, grounded herself in it. She was here. She was standing. She was not hurt. One of the 2 men who had intervened was on a phone. The other stood at a careful distance from her, both hands visible, not approaching. Safe. He's already on his way. She slid slowly down the pillar until she was sitting on the garage floor, her back against the concrete, and she waited. Kang came through the stairwell door 3 minutes later. He crossed the garage before it finished closing behind him. He crouched in front of her. His hands moved to her face, her arms, her wrists checking, methodical, with a focus so complete and a touch so careful that it belonged to a version of him she had not yet seen. Not the man from the corridor. Not the man across the lunch table. Someone beneath both of those where the control did not reach. Not hurt. He said it the way people say things they need to hear spoken aloud. Not hurt. He stayed crouched in front of her. The controlled exterior was present, but thinner than she had ever seen it. She could see the shape of what lived underneath pressing against the surface from inside. She looked at him. You had people following me. A line being drawn. She needed him to feel the weight of it. Yes. Since when? The week after the stadium. Ground tilted slightly under that. The week after the stadium. While she was putting flowers in water and telling herself she didn't know anything yet. While she was sitting across a lunch table asking careful questions and believing she was moving at her own pace in her own chosen direction. She had not been moving alone for a single day of this. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have left. Honesty of it landed differently than she expected. No management around it, no softening, no framing, just the truth given with both hands and nowhere to hide it. There were people following me before tonight, she said. Before your men, you moved against me. His eyes shifted. That name in her voice. She watched it move through him, the information, the implications, the confirmation of what he had feared was already in motion. Jin came to warn me, she said. He absorbed that. The betrayal and the loyalty living in the same moment, pulling in opposite directions simultaneously. He went behind my back, Kang said. He was protecting you. He told you something only the truth would explain. She held his eyes. And I just gave him up by telling you, so we're both doing things we can't take back tonight. Something moved across his face. I have been afraid for you since the first week, he said. I didn't have the right to be. You didn't agree to any of this. But I could not make it stop. He looked at her with nothing between them. I should have told you from the beginning what being near me means. I didn't, because I was, he stopped, found the word deliberately. Selfish. Rebecca sat on the floor of a parking garage in a city that Kang Jaiho controlled more of than its elected officials, and she looked at this man who had just offered her the word selfish with the gravity of a confession, and she felt the entire accumulated weight of the last several weeks reorganize itself into something she could finally see clearly. She was already inside this. She had been since a corridor, since nachos, since a small girl turning in slow circles with a crayon drawing in her pocket. The question was never whether to enter. The question was what to do now that she was here and understood where here actually was. "Tell me everything," she said. He looked at her. "Some of it. If I'm already in danger anyway, I am not going to be in the dark. Tell me everything." Garage was completely quiet. "Okay," Kang said. "We have reached the moment where everything Rebecca thought she understood is about to be reframed. And if you have been watching from the very beginning, you already know this channel does not waste your time. Like this video right now, you know this story has earned it. And drop your city in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? I want to see every country, every time zone, every person who found this story and stayed. Because what happens next between Rebecca and Kang, nobody sees coming. Stay with me." Kang found Jin in the training room. He closed the door, stood in the center of the space. The room smelled of rubber mat and metal, and the particular stillness of a place that absorbed years of difficult conversations and held them in the walls. He looked at Jin with the expression that 12 years had taught Jin meant. "I already know. Say it anyway." "She needed to know," Jin said. "You went to her without telling me. I went to protect the person you are protecting without admitting that you're protecting her." He held Kang's eyes without flinching. "You pulled me aside after the meeting. He told me she was a liability. He told me to handle it." He paused. "I have done things for you that I do not speak about. I am asking you to understand that what I did this time, I did for you, not against you." Kang was quiet for a long time, long enough that the silence changed quality, stopped feeling like anger and started feeling like something that cost more than anger. "He moved against her," Kang said. "3 nights ago, 2 men in a parking garage." He looked at Jin directly. "My team got there, she's not hurt, but you escalated, which means he has decided she is not going away on her own and he is no longer sending messages." Jin was very still. "He put his hand into the wrong thing," Kang said. "This ends and I am going to need you." He held Jin's eyes. "Not the way you suggested. 12 years understood what that meant without being told." "Yes," Jin said. She asked him about the people he had hurt, not in accusation, not in judgment. With her eyes open and her hands flat on her knees, the way a person examines a room in a house they are deciding whether to live in, measuring, not running. They were in Kang's private residence. The first time she had been there. Clean lines, deliberate quiet, every surface chosen with precision. Warm light against pale walls. Beautiful in a way that felt simultaneously like welcome and warning. Sua's drawings were on the refrigerator. That single detail made the room human in a way nothing else in it could. Kang did not minimize, did not reduce numbers or soften circumstances until they sounded smaller than they were. He told her what she asked, and then he told her a little more, and the room held all of it without collapsing. When he finished, she was quiet. Not withdrawn, present, absorbing, thinking at a speed she didn't let show then. "Could you leave this life?" He looked at her. The real look, no surface management, no curated distance. The look she had been watching form incrementally across weeks of careful proximity. "Think about Sua," he said. "What world she inherits from me, what she understands about her father when she is old enough to understand it. That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a moment. "No, it isn't." He did not answer the question directly. But she heard the answer living in the space around what he said, in the weight of what he didn't say, in the way his eyes went to the refrigerator and the drawings on it while he was speaking. She left her jacket on his chair that evening. She didn't realize until she was home. She left it there. Chairman Yu found her at work. He was polite, precise. The kind of man who had spent decades in rooms where everyone was performing and had become extraordinary at the performance himself. He said he admired her. Said she struck him as a woman of genuine intelligence. Said it would be a shame to see someone like her consumed by a world whose rules she did not fully understand. He told her Kang had a history with women who got close. He didn't elaborate. He let the implication breathe and expand in the silence, the way a careful man lets implications do the work he does not want his hands to be connected to. Then he offered her money, a number large enough to be the only point of the sentence. Rebecca listened to every word, every inflection. She noted the exit he used, the specific phrasing around women who got close, the way he watched her face for the response he had designed this conversation to produce. She thanked him for his concern. She walked out of the building, sat in her car, and called Kang before she had started the engine. He answered before the first ring finished. She told him everything. Flat and clean, delivered the way she understood he needed information. Every word, every inflection, the number, the implication, the specific exit you had used. The silence on his end when she finished was a particular kind. Not absence. the sound of something being decided with complete certainty. Go to the address I'm sending you now. Don't go home first. What are you going to do? Handle it. Put his hand into the wrong thing. Quiet. Final. Not angry, something lower than anger and more permanent than it. This ends today. She went to the address. What Kang had on Chairman Yu had been collected over 7 years with the patience of a man who had learned early that power is almost entirely about what you know and precisely when you decide to use it. He had kept it in reserve the way you keep something irreplaceable, for the moment when not using it costs more than spending it. That moment had arrived, and the calculation was instant. Jin moved through 3 conversations in 2 hours. Documents arrived at the right destinations. Questions were raised in rooms where questions carry structural consequences that cannot be undone. Use carefully assembled surface-developed fractures, he would spend the remainder of his career managing. But Kang paid a cost. The documents he released, the 7 years of careful collection, were spent. Insurance he would never hold again. Information that had protected him in 3 different directions simultaneously, now gone. The using of it left him more exposed in 2 specific areas than he had been in years. Jin knew it. Kang knew it. Kang had spent it without hesitation. For her, Jin reported in 4 words. It's done. He's finished. Kang stood at his window for a moment. The city below him, the lights of everything he controlled spreading out to the edges of what he could see. He had built all of it. Every piece. Every alliance and leverage point and carefully maintained balance of power. He had spent a significant piece of it tonight for a woman who had crouched down in a corridor and talked to his daughter like a small person. He did not regret it. That was the part that told him everything he needed to know. He found her at Sua's bedside. He had expected the sitting room. Expected distance. The careful management he had come to understand was how Rebecca handled large things. Instead, she was sitting on the edge of Sua's bed reading from a book with cartoon football players on the cover, her voice low and even, and Sua was asleep. Rebecca looked up, closed the book quietly. They stood in the hallway outside the room and she asked him directly what he had done. He told her, including the cost, all of it. She was quiet for a moment. Is it enough? For now. Later, he looked at her. There will always be a later, that is the truth, I won't tell you otherwise. She nodded slowly. She accepted that the way she accepted everything directly, fully, without needing it to be different than it was, then he said, There is a drawing. She looked at him. He walked her to his office. Opened the desk drawer, not unlocking it, she noticed, not reaching for a key. It was simply open. Unlocked at some point and left that way. He laid the drawing on the desk in front of her. 3 figures, crayon on white card. A man with long black hair and inked hands, a small girl, and between them a 3rd figure, her face colored in with careful, deliberate attention, standing together at a football stadium. The stadium was pink. Rebecca looked at it for a long time. She recognized it. It was the same drawing, the same figures. Sua had shown her this drawing in the corridor, unfolded from the pocket of her jersey, and Rebecca had looked at the 3rd figure and felt something she could not name and had not examined since. She showed me this, Rebecca said quietly. In the corridor, before we found you, she said she made the 3rd figure before she met her. She said she just always drew her there because that was where she was supposed to go. Kang was very still. When did you get it? She said. She gave it to me 3 weeks before the game. On the way to a different stadium. He looked at the drawing. I almost left it in the car. I put it in my pocket instead. He paused. I had it with me the night you walked down that corridor. I had it with me the whole time. Room was completely quiet. Rebecca looked at the drawing. At the 3rd figure with the careful eyes that Sua had colored in with specific, deliberate attention. At the space between the man with the inked hands and the small girl that had been left, intentionally, for exactly this shape. She thought about what Sua had said. I just always drew her there because that's where she was supposed to go. An 8-year-old child had known something that 2 careful adults had spent weeks trying not to say out loud. She gave me the same drawing in the corridor, Rebecca said. She had it in her pocket. She carries it with her. Kang looked at her. She carries it with her, he repeated. They stood in the quiet of his office with that between them, and neither of them tried to make it smaller than it was. Marcus came back on a Wednesday. He brought food, his specific currency for I was right and I'm still here. She let him in and they sat on her kitchen floor the way they had sat on floors in apartments they couldn't afford at 22, and she told him everything. He was quiet through most of it. The real kind of quiet, listening rather than preparing his response. When she finished, he looked at the wall for a long time. Do you love him? He said. She looked at the ceiling. I don't know what I am yet. I know I'm different than I was. I know when I thought about leaving it felt like leaving the wrong thing. She paused. I know his daughter drew my face from memory before she had ever seen it. Marcus was quiet again. You should have led with the drawing, he said finally. She laughed. Real, full, the kind that doesn't have anything running underneath it. The first time in weeks she had laughed without something else carrying beneath it. Marcus started to stand. She stopped him. He spent something significant to protect me, she said. Something he can't get back. He told me about it without me asking. He wanted me to know the cost. Marcus looked at her for a long time. That's the part, he said quietly. That's the part that matters. She nodded. You better invite me to whatever this turns into, he said. She laughed again. He stayed 3 hours. When he left, the apartment felt like it had settled into its correct weight, something redistributed and placed where it actually belonged. Kang sat at Sua's bedside that night. She was supposed to be asleep. Is Rebecca your best friend? She asked from under the blanket. Supposed to be sleeping. I am sleeping. Is she your best friend? He looked at his daughter. The familiar arrangement of her face in the nightlight, the face that was his only fear and his only certainty. The face he had been carrying a drawing for since 3 weeks before any of this began, without knowing why, without asking himself why, because some things are known before they are understood. Maybe, he said. Sua made a sound of profound satisfaction and pulled the blanket to her chin. He sat in the quiet of her room for a long time. The night light making everything soft. The drawing in the other room, out of the drawer in the open. He had built this life, all of it, the organization, the control, the careful architecture of power and consequence, and he had believed for years that the building was sufficient. That it was the point. A child followed a balloon vendor at halftime and disappeared into 70,000 people. And a woman in a home team jersey crouched down and talked to her like a small person. He had been carrying the drawing the entire time. He had spent 7 years of irreplaceable leverage to keep her safe, and he had not hesitated for a single second. He had unlocked the desk drawer and left it open. Some things are known before they are understood. He had understood now. The stadium was louder than the first time. Different game. Late season. The kind of night where the air holds cold enough to see your breath and warm enough that nobody leaves at halftime. 70,000 people in full voice, the sound of it rising and falling like something alive. They were in the same section. Sua between them, wrapped in the scarf Rebecca had brought specifically for tonight, eating popcorn with the devoted focus of a child who had decided popcorn was the primary purpose of attending any sporting event in existence. She was narrating every play in a low-running commentary that neither adult fully processed, and neither would have stopped for any reason available to them. Rebecca and Kang sat close, not performing anything, not demonstrating anything for the people around them, just present side by side in the noise and the light, the crowd roaring below, the two of them the stillest things in the building. At some point in the second quarter, their hands were near each other on the armrest. Neither moved away. Rebecca said something low, words that existed only in the small space between them, swallowed by the crowd before they could travel any further. Kang turned to look at her. And there it was, the thing that had no operational procedure, no category, no precedent in 12 years of Jin working alongside this man. The thing Jin had first seen in a stadium corridor on a halftime night when a woman in a home jersey had nodded once and turned to walk away. The thing that had been living on Kang's face in unguarded moments ever since. The thing he had stopped trying to manage. He didn't say anything back. He didn't need to. The crowd surged around them. Sua shrieked at a near miss on the field and reached for both their hands at once, one in each, without looking, without asking, with the complete unquestioning confidence of a child who had decided a thing was already true and was simply living inside that truth, like she had always known, like she had drawn it that way on purpose. Rebecca looked down at Sua's hand around hers, at Kang's hand on the other side, at the three of them in a stadium where all of this had started. She thought about halftime, about nachos, about a little girl in a too-big jersey turning in slow circles with a crayon drawing folded in her pocket, a drawing with 3 figures and a space already left, already waiting, already shaped to exactly this. She hadn't changed her life that day. She had simply stopped. She had seen someone who needed to be seen and she had stopped, and her life had changed anyway. That is the thing about kindness that no one tells you. It is never small. It is never without consequence, and the consequences are not always the kind you were taught to fear. Sometimes the thing your kindness finds turns around and finds you back. Sometimes it finds you in a corridor with ink on its hands and a child attached to its jacket and an expression that has no category in any language you speak. Sometimes it has been carrying your face in its pocket the entire time. And sometimes, in the loudest, most crowded, most ordinary place in the world, you realize that being found was always the point. If this episode moved something in you tonight, this is the moment. Like this video right now. Not for the algorithm, because you felt something real inside this story and you want more of it, and that is the only reason that has ever mattered on this channel. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. Turn the bell on. Episode 2 is coming, and what Kang's past contains will reframe everything you thought you understood about tonight, including the drawing, including the desk drawer, including the thing Kang spent that he can never get back. You do not want to find that episode 3 weeks late. And then share this. Not to help numbers. Share it because you know someone who needs a story like this right now. Someone who needs to sit with Rebecca for a while. Someone who needs to be reminded that stopping for a stranger in a crowd can be the most consequential thing a person ever does. Drop your city in the comments. Every single one. Every country, every time zone, every person who found this story tonight and stayed until the end. I want to see where in the world Lost in the Crowd is landing. I will see you in episode 2.